Hey, everybody, and welcome to Plant Prescription. I am Michelle Opella, and I am joined by my cohort.
Justin, I'm a horticulturist here at Costa Farms.
And as you know, if you listen to the podcast prior, I am a bug person. And so, on the theme of that, I want to start off this podcast with a fun bug fact. You ready, Justin?
I am. Bring it on.
Okay, so not a bug that you would usually find on your plants, especially house plants, but I want to take a minute and give a little homage to this insect called the golden tortoise beetle. Very pretty
Sounds
sounding
fun.
name. Right. Very pretty sounding name. And if you are so inclined and you want to Google the golden tortoise beetle, you will see it is a gorgeous beetle. As the name implies, it is gold and it is pretty. But I want to tell you something more funner, if you will, about this insect. This is one of those things that I stumbled upon one day and it has stuck with me. The larval form of the golden tortoise beetle actually has this apparatus that is beautifully named a fecal shield.
So
Palpable
I'm
reaction.
kind of imagining something like Captain America here.
So I'm letting that sink in. So a fecal shield, basically this is like a little larva. Again, complete metamorphosis, doesn't look like the adult. It looks totally different. And it basically has this tail where it carries around this, well, sack of poop. And whenever it is threatened, it'll flip its tail up and therefore flick up its fecal shield, its poop shield, and kind of ward off any predators that may be trying to eat it. Because, not a lot of things out there like to just be face to face with a pile of poop. And it's kind of, I think anything out there would lose their appetite if they were face to face with that. So
So it's like
it's
a little living catapult?
yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't catapult it. It needs to keep it because it can't get rid of it, can't throw its fecal shield because then what's going to happen the next time another predator comes along, right? But it's like a catapult without something flying off of it. But yeah, similar, but it stays. Um, so if you want to Google it, I encourage you to Google it. Golden tortoise beetle, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful adult that literally came from a bug carrying around a pile of poop. I mean, if that isn't a comeback kid story, I don't know what is. And that is my fun fact. You're welcome, world. Okay.
So, so do we
So
want to
I
talk
guess
about
Justin,
houseplants?
maybe let's just jump right into the questions now that everybody is thoroughly appalled by that fun fact.
All right. Our first question today comes from Emily in Superior, Montana. And this is a question I suspect you're going to love, Michelle. What's the secret to growing Calatheas? Because mine always die. So first off, Emily, you are not alone.
No, you're not. You're one of many who, I don't want to use the H word, who have a strong feelings about Calatheas. Um, Strong negative feelings possibly, but you don't have to. They're not mm, I want to say that they're not hard, but depending on the conditions, they can be hard. So I
Yeah, like any plant, sorry, Michelle, I think this is a perfect place to jump in. And,
Mhm.
any plant is going to be easier or more challenging based on the conditions and how much it likes those conditions. And I think one of the challenges with Calatheas is that they're not as tolerant as a lot of conditions in the house as something like, say a pothos or a spathiphyllum would be.
Exactly. First and foremost, the tolerance level of the humidity is going to be, and the humidity and the moisture, first and foremost, is going to be pretty low on these guys, meaning they like humidity and they like moisture, aka water. Um, as a rule of thumb, there are a couple of Calatheas. There's so many different species, and I've noticed there are a couple that are a little bit more durable than others. But as a whole, rule of thumb, they don't like to dry out. Like they do not like to be dry at all. And in the winter, especially when you're heating, if you're in Missouri, you said?
Montana.
Oh, yeah, you'll definitely be heating in the winter. So if you're heating in the winter, your humidity is going to drop sometimes below 30% even, and they really don't like that. And so, like I said, there are a few different varieties that I found that can be a little bit more durable. In my experience, I'm just going to name off one of them, the Calathea Lancifolia, or the rattlesnake Calathea. In my experience, seems to be a little bit more tolerant of those humidity levels. Um, so, but in my experience, a Calathea orbifolia, absolutely no tolerance for dry downs and low humidity. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, it is a more it is a more finicky variety within the clan. In my experience, Network has been the easiest of the Calatheas. Um, and one way to kind of gauge that, Emily, is feel the leaves. In general, the thicker the leaf, the more it's going to hold up against drying out and low humidity.
Yeah, very good
Now,
observation. Yep.
if low humidity is something that's plaguing you, you can try to augment humidity by putting your calatheas in a cloche, or if you want to get super fancy, like in a display case, so you're trapping more moist air around them.
What is a,
That can well,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to ask, what is a cloche? Is that like the Beauty and the Beast kind of, you put the glass vase over it kind of
yep,
thing?
like a big bell jar. Hmm.
Okay. I've never heard the actual name. I just always call it the Beauty and the Beast method.
Yeah.
I may be the only one that calls
So
it that.
So like a closer display case creates a more humid atmosphere by basically giving you a smaller amount of air that it's easier to maintain high humidity levels in rather than trying to humidify your entire house. Um, Another way to make calatheas a little bit more easy to maintain is grow them in a self-watering system
Yeah.
because that way the moisture level is always consistent. You never have to worry, are they getting a little too wet? Are they getting a little too dry?
And Justin just touched on something that I think is very important with calatheas, consistency. Depending on the humidity in its set of your environmental conditions, if they're way out of the calathea's normal range, it's not going to be able to adapt. But if they're kind of in the range, consistency is key. Consistent watering, consistent humidity, just consistency. Just land on something and just stay there for a while. It does take a while for plants to adjust to this and kind of get in the groove of things. But I found with calatheas, if I move them out in the summer in the shade, which is very similar to what they would normally like. But if I move them out from under the grow lights outdoors, they still have a fit, even though my humidity is like 50% humidity in the summer. So consistency is key. Just find something and stick with it for a few months, I would recommend.
Yeah, if you think about it, in nature, plants don't move. They're rooted in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever you change a plant's environment, whether it's light, whether it's temperature, whether it's humidity, whether it's even airflow,
Yep.
that can cause some stress to it. And
Yep.
some plants don't show that stress very readily. Something like an Aglaonema, it takes a lot more to stress it than it does something like a Calathea.
Yeah, Calatheas will tell you immediately, but then they'll tell you immediately if they don't like it, but they'll kind of make you wait to know if they do like it. Um, and okay, since we're talking about Calatheas, let's talk about water quality because I have an opinion on this, but I know that you have heard a lot more on this than I have, like watering with tap water on Calatheas. I think we talked about this in the previous episode also. Justin, could you give your input on this? Because my input's pretty quick.
Yeah, 99% of the time, regular tap water is fine. If you live in a municipality that has like a high fluoride level, then tap water can be problematic because there can actually be fluoride toxicity. And if this is the case in your area, the easiest thing to do is just to dilute your tap water by adding rainwater, distilled water, or bottled water to it. So you have the same amount of fluoride but in a much larger volume of water, bringing that overall concentration down.
Exactly. Wholeheartedly agree with that because I've seen a lot of people go through a lot of monumental efforts to water their calatheas with like distilled water or rainwater. I mean, putting buckets outside and bringing them in to water their calatheas specifically, but it isn't really necessary most of the time. So, just take all of that with a grain of salt. Um, One other thing I want to talk about, because I can't talk about calatheas, I feel like, without talking about this one thing that you will likely find on your calatheas at some point, which is spider mites. And that could be another thing that is kind of bringing your calatheas down, because they are spider mite magnets. I call them in my house, I kind of call them the canary in the coal mine, because if anything is going to have spider mites, it's going to be calatheas or alocasias. Um, and so there is another episode, I think, that we talk about two-spotted spider mites in detail, but at a glance, just really quickly, if you look at your calatheas and they just don't look happy, flip the leaves over and look at the bottom of those leaves. If you see like little flecks that look like dust, if you have really good vision and you can stare at them and maybe like make out if those little flecks of dust are moving, there's a good chance that those are two-spotted spider mites. Did you have something to add? I see you over there.
Um, yeah, the feeding pattern is another giveaway. They
Mhm.
make like little light colored pinprick marks in the leaves. And that, like, to me, that's the easiest way to discern from a distance whether it may be spider mites or whether it just be regular old household dust, of which my house has way too much.
Likewise. Um, Well, anyway, so they will likely be on your plant at some point. Don't panic. And there's so many ways to treat spider mites depending on the amount of plants that you have in your collection. You could go the route of buying predatory mites. Um, if you have a lot of plants, that would probably be the easiest way to treat for spider mites instead of flipping leaves. But if you have like a smaller collection, you're probably better off spraying for them. There's oils out there. There's a lot of products out there that are labeled for two-spotted spider mites because they have such a quick life cycle. You're going to need to spray a couple of times in a week in the beginning, maybe like 2 times a week, and then maybe back it off to once a week. Again, it really depends on your temperature and humidity and well, not light so much, but temperature and humidity, definitely temperature, because just like plants, that grow at a higher rate, a higher temperature, generally speaking. Insects will also grow faster at a higher temperature, generally speaking. There's always exceptions. So,
For a lot more on spider mites, do check out another episode of the podcast here, where we spend quite a bit of time talking about spider mite control.
yes. And I just, while you were saying that, one last thing about calatheas is like zero sun, direct sunlight. Maybe I don't even put mine in the morning sun, to be honest with you. They just seem like a little bit too sensitive to direct sunlight. So if you have yours in an area where it's getting any sort of direct sun rays and it's burning, it that's what's going on there.
So we hope that helps you be more successful with Calatheas in the future, Emily.
Yes. Good
M-
luck.
Moving on to the next question. This comes from Austin in Gainesville, Florida. People are debating about whether you can grow caladium as a houseplant. What's your take, guys?
This has become a really hot topic lately. I've seen it a lot. And it's one of those things that I never really expected to see personally, and like the houseplant thing. So, I mean, to me, caladiums are not house plants. Just because I just always like I grew up with caladiums in the landscape. Nah, I grew up in New York. We would put them out and then take them in the winter. Um, but I I had a caladium. I think I still do somewhere. I think I lost it in my houseplant collection, and I have grow lights.
I'm
Everything
sorry, wait,
stays.
Michelle. You think you lost it and it may be still alive, or you lost it and it may no longer be with us somewhere in your houseplant collection?
Well, thanks for the pushing that clarification. No, it is somewhere in my collection because the reason, okay, so the reason I have lost it is because I have a few pots, just a few, like 10, 20 plus, where I have no idea what's in them. Because a couple of my things go dormant, or it is something I'm currently rooting and growing, and it's a stem with like no leaves on it, so I can't tell what it is. And I'm pretty sure my Calatheas are one of those pots. Um, because I was going here, try as I might, and maybe other people have better luck with this, but try as I might, in my little grow room with the humidity and the warmth and the grow lights set on like 14-hour plus days, my caladiums still go dormant.
For those of you who are newbies to the plant world, dormant means a plant basically goes to sleep. It loses its leaves. It may drop its stems, definitely drops its flowers. And in the case of a perennial plant like a caladium, the only thing that's alive are the roots. And so when it goes dormant, you don't see it at all.
I'm
And
I'm at
that's the what, Michelle?
No, 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 keep going.
So I think that's the root of the controversy. There's the camp of people who are like, it's so beautiful, and I'm willing to grow it no matter what it takes. And then there's the camp of people who are like, yeah, this is not worth it because 6 months of the year I have an empty pot sitting around.
Exactly. So they're in here somewhere. I have the I want to put in air quotes for those who are not watching YouTube, quote unquote fancy caladiums. I mean, they're all fancy, they're all pretty, but I actually like paid more than $10 for a couple of caladiums that I have. So therefore they are fancy by my standards, for the bulbs. Paid $10 for like a bulb. They're very fancy. They're in there somewhere. And it is summertime. So I have one actually that I put out on the porch and it's coming back. And I know that one is there. And then there's another one somewhere that I'm just waiting for it to pop up. Um, I agree with Justin. Some people may think that it's totally worth it because half of the year you're not going to have a plant. Um, and that is exactly how I feel about Amorphophallus, which is the same as Caladium, only like not the same at all. The same dormancy routine. Amorphophallus is the corpse flower. It's not the same as a Caladium. But for me, it's totally worth it to put those guys out in the summer and get them to come back from dormancy every year because I personally just really, really, really like that plant. And so if you really, really, really like caladiums, there's nothing wrong with that. They can be house plants, half of the year for you.
Just have to know what you're getting into.
I did want to clarify one thing though. Justin did call them perennials, and I disagree with that. They are perennials in Miami and Florida and tropical environments. But if you were to leave caladium bulbs out in the winter in the ground here in North Carolina or in Oregon, they would not come back. They are not like they're perennials to like tropical zones. Okay. I see where you're going, but I
So
consider
yes,
them
yeah,
annuals. But yeah.
botanically they are a perennial plant. Um, but yes, it depends on your climate as to whether they will survive as a perennial.
Yeah. I'm going to
I
use
should have
a zone
probably been more
hardiness map.
specific. Good call.
Yeah, it's like a sliver where caladiums are actually perennials on the hardiness map. Like
South Florida.
yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay. I feel like
And it's funny, like even in South Florida, you see a lot of growers selling caladiums as annuals.
yes. Yeah, I mean they're getting really popular and there's some beautiful caladiums out there. They are very, very pretty. Um Again, it's all about if you understand that they're not going to be there for half of the year and if you're okay with that, they're beautiful. You could make anything a house plant. You could make Well, okay, you can't. Okay, I agree. You can't make anything a houseplant, but you can make a lot of things houseplants. I mean, look, people even have lemons as houseplants. My friend, her big goal is to get this giant lemon tree for her house. I think Bridgerton maybe over inspired her. But I just love it. She's got all these like crazy different weird plants, and like her number one plant, she wants a lemon tree for her house for indoors.
When I
So
lived in Des Moines, I had a variegated lemon in my sunroom, and I really
yeah,
cared about it more for the variegated foliage than I did actually producing lemons. But yeah, it was a fun novelty
exactly.
until the thorns scratched me too many times, and I'm like, yeah, no, I can't deal with this anymore.
Oh no. Yeah. But they are pretty. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying that strange thing that you can make a house plant like any, you can make a lot of things a house plant if you want to, but not everything. Okay. All right. Moving on from this one.
All right, question number 3 comes from D in Amarillo, Texas. My fern has some black spots on the bottom of the leaves. One of my friends said it's scale, but another one is telling me it's spores. How do I know the difference? I'm going to toss
Uh,
this to you, Michelle, since it's bug related.
I know this is a really good question too. This is very, very good. Um, I'm gonna go on a whim and say it is likely spores, but if you want to try to tell them apart, um, I've had spores on ferns before, and they tend to be in like a very even pattern on the leaf, right? So one way you can tell if it's a spore just at a glance is to look at kind of like if there's a pattern there, like if they're all evenly spaced, evenly sized, just
In
like
rows.
yeah, in rows, exactly. If you see that they're all the same size ish and this like in a pattern is probably spores. Scale don't really create patterns for the most part. They kind of just like glob on there and it's kind of sporadic. Um, Another way, I guess, if I were looking at it and trying to tell it apart is if you flip it over, right, and you try to kind of scrape it off, the spores will kind of disintegrate and they'll kind of like sand. They'll kind of like you can like scrape it off bit by bit and they'll kind of come off little bits by bits. A scale is one whole thing. And let me talk about scale. So scale is an insect, as Justin implied, and it is one of the more difficult ones to deal with. There's a lot of different types of scale out there. There's hard scale and soft scale. Um, and they essentially look like little pimples on a plant. Those pimples can be all different colors and shapes and sizes, etc., but they look like plant pimples, like little low ones. And these obviously are pests. We don't want them on our plants. And they do suck the juice and the sap from the plant. But typically speaking, scale don't move. Now, they do move at one stage in their life. It would be crazy if they just like never moved at all. But that stage is very small. So they hatch and then they're little crawlers and they'll kind of find a spot to settle down. And then they will literally settle down into the plant. Depending on the scale, they'll kind of create either a hard or soft cover over their body and kind of like
Like a
cocoon
shield.
themselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, we're going back to shields again. Not a fecal shield though. But they'll kind of create a shield over their body and like you will not be able to see any appendages like legs, head, anything like that. They are most insects, the smaller pest ones, you can't really see many appendages on it anyway. But so these are basically like plant pimples and they are very difficult to kill because again that shield protects them from a lot of things. um, so if you are looking at your fern and you're kind of scraping this thing and it's coming off like sand, probably not a scale, because those scale again are just one like insect covered in a shield. But if it's not seeming to kind of scrape off or have a sandy consistency, It may be scale. Also, if it's very uneven distribution, maybe. I would again call, I don't think it would be. I am not a grower of ferns. I don't have any in my collection actually, but I don't know how many scale are common on ferns. It doesn't to me seem like a really big host of scale. I'm sure that there's one or two out there because I mean there's so many insects, but gut reaction, it doesn't seem like a really big common host for these insects. So if it rubs off like sand, if it's in a pattern, it's probably just spores. If it's not in a pattern and it doesn't kind of rub off or have a sandy consistency, it may be scale. And if you really, 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 really want to know and you want to spend some time looking at it, if you do think it's scale, if all the signs point to that, you can try you can try to kind of pry it off the leaf and look at the underside of it because you may see something moving if you flip it on its back. But that is going to be really difficult for just anybody to do that. Another thing with scale is that, they all have there's different life stages, right? There's different instars, et cetera, et cetera. So if they are not like the same size, if there's a lot of different sizes and shapes and stuff, it may be scale. So that's my best explanation, Justin. I don't know from your perspective, is there anything that you would think of?
No, I mean, you hit on everything. The rows, the organization that spores tend to be produced in, and then if you take one off the plant, you know, in general, scale insects because their insects are going to be like squishy if you know, um,
Current scale. Yeah.
so I guess it may not be squishy,
Yeah.
depending on the type of scale. I assume that they would all have a squishy center, but maybe not. So yeah, look for the even rows,
Oh,
and the organization pattern, them all being the same size. Um, yeah, exactly. So
okay. I didn't realize you were talking about when you flip it over and poke its belly, so to say. Yes, it should be squishy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was
I thought
thinking
you were just
actually
saying it should
squishing
be
it.
squishy to touch. I'm like, no, not
Yeah.
necessarily. Okay, yes, you're right. If you flip it over and you poke its belly, or what you think is its belly, it should be kind of squishy, but squishy is going to be super duper tiny, and you're going to be very, very careful, or you will just smush it. Also, you could just smush it and see what happens. We won't go there though. This is a PG rated podcast, so we're not going to go into that.
All right. Want to transition into a houseplant myth?
Okay.
This one I feel is kind of a two-pronger.
Okay.
If I keep rosemary as a houseplant, it will keep bugs off of my other houseplants.
How ironic, because we were just talking about how you could make anything a houseplant.
Yeah.
And here we are. Um, okay, so I'm just gonna go off, and this is Michelle's opinion, strictly Michelle's opinion. I think that rosemary is a difficult houseplant. And that is again just my opinion. It is more of a durable herb. Um, but I do think that it does need quite a lot of light. So again, Michelle's opinion, I think it's a difficult houseplant. Now, if you can manage to, if you have one indoors and it's doing well, great. And if it's going to repel pests or not,
I know
I
it
mean,
totally surprises me that the IPM manager goes for whether rosemary is a good houseplant first.
well, because we were talking about it, it's fresh in my mind talking about, well, you can't make everything a houseplant. Well, I mean, like this is one of those things where it's like, if you can, you can, but if you can't, you can't. You'd have to have a really bright sunny room, I think. That's again Michelle's opinion.
I kept one for, I want to say it was like 4 years in my kitchen when I lived in Des Moines.
Okay. Well, you are a
Um,
wizard. Did your
I,
kitchen have
I,
full, did it get sun?
yep,
Yeah.
it was right in a south-facing window. The window was about 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide.
Oh my God.
So yeah, the thing got to bask in just all kinds of direct
Sun.
light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, well, shifting gears. if you want it to have a plant with a purpose kind of thing and have some sort of effect on repelling pests, my take is it will repel the pests on that plant. There are more insecticides, miticides, things available on the market that use rosemary oil as a kind of double thing. It's the oil that is suffocant and the rosemary to repel pests. Um, and I also think that there's some fungicidal properties, but don't quote me on that. This is not my typical realm. There's just rosemary oil in particular, I'm saying. Um, I don't think it'll work very well to repel pests from all of your plants. Um, but that plant and maybe the plant right next to it, if you're lucky, again, this is all just Michelle's opinion. Justin,
I'm gonna totally disagree with you there.
you disagree
Um,
with me?
Sorry.
Did
The thing about the oil in the rosemary, it's the volatile organic compounds that give it its scent that seem to have the pest repelling quality. So just having a rosemary plant there, it's not releasing this organic compounds into the air to do any repelling at all.
You didn't disagree with me because I said like on that rosemary, maybe you'd
Well,
have some luck.
well, I'm
Huh?
gonna say, yeah, not even on the rosemary.
Yeah.
or any surrounding plants with it. Because again, those oils aren't being released unless it's being brushed up or rubbed against. I have had a rosemary that had a not the one in Des Moines, a different one, that had a really severe infestation of spider mites.
Hmm.
So, that to me tells me that rosemary itself is not even protected from insect infants. Well, I guess spider mites aren't insects.
Thank
But
you.
But yes, the the fact that it can be infested by pests tells me that it's if it can't protect itself, it's not going to protect anybody else. Unless you have something kind of constantly agitating it, so those oils are
Agitating
released.
of the rosemary. Yeah. Yeah. But
Yeah,
look,
which is
I didn't
not
disagree
particularly
too much. I
realistic.
was trying to be optimistic. I was trying to be like, well, um, maybe on that one plant. Um, but no, we both agree on the fact that it's probably not going to reduce the pests in your house. So,
If you want to grow rosemary, it is a fantastic plant to cook with. If you have the right environment, it actually looks really nice indoors. But yeah, that's where I would limit this is the reason to grow rosemary.
right. Yeah. No, there's many reasons to grow it. Just buy rosemary
Pest
oil.
control, not one of them, sadly.
Yeah. Just buy the miticide. It's going to be easier. Well, we won't go there. Okay. So plant myth or not plant myth, plant update. Do you have any of those today?
So I have a little greenhouse here in Oregon, and Michelle's talk about plant walls got me inspired. And so I was able to find two 8-foot tall pallets.
Mm-hmm.
I dragged them into my greenhouse and I made a little wall. And so now I'm going to grow some of my aeroids up them.
Yay.
Um, I successfully got my Monstera deliciosa and my Rhaphidophora
Decursiva.
decursiva, which Michelle
Oh,
gave me, up
oh.
up against it. And now I want to try some of the pothos like the Mandula and the Cebu Blue because I just see all of these people who are doing the big leaves and I'm like, I could do that. Why am I not doing
Hmm.
it? I don't know. So um I am going to start doing that.
That is exciting because I just speaking of plant updates, for those of you who are not on Justin and I's text messages, which is everybody, I just today sent you a photo of my Monstera adansonii leaf that's climbing up the wall, and wow, I mean they're beautiful plants, but that leaf is about the size of my head now, and the fenestrations in the plant, it's just really pretty with that big old leaf. And I am more excited for the plants like pothos, And this Adansonia, I'm going to keep it going. I'm going to see how big I can get these leaves. I'm really excited for those plants that, you don't typically see them growing up a wall. And what are they going to turn into? What's going to happen to them? Especially Mandula. I'm so glad you're doing that too, because I haven't started it yet. I've got my little pot going, but what is that going to look like? Like this giant kind of global looking leaf with like white and like light green. Oh, I'm excited. So I
You
race you
know,
to the top on the Mandula.
oh, you're definitely going to win.
You have
Um,
a greenhouse. I don't know.
I know I haven't even started yet, so you're ahead of me.
Oh,
Um,
well, yeah.
You
It's
know, when I was in Miami, I remember going to the Aroid show at Fairchild Botanical Garden, and
Mhm.
there was a vendor who would sell chunks of Monstera adansonii that was
Oh,
growing. I don't know where, and some of those leaves were like 24 inches long,
oh,
and it was always so much fun to watch people saying, "What is that?
what
That's
is this
so
plant?
exotic." And it's yeah, and he'd say, "Oh, this is just regular, Swiss cheese Monstera."
Yes.
And the number of people who wouldn't believe it, um,
Hmm.
because it's kind of hard to fathom when you haven't seen it,
Yeah.
that the leaf gets just that much more majestic.
It gets so big and like the holes are giant. It is crazy. And I gotta say, the Philodendron Varicosum, I am blown away by that one right now because I thought that certain plants had a limit, right? Like the leaves can only get so big. I thought I thought that that's how it was with the Varicosum, and there is one of the three plants that I have growing up the wall where the leaves are 2 feet, I believe is the measurement I took, 2 feet long on those leaves. Wait,
Wow.
maybe I'm blah, 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 blah. I literally took a photo of it. Hold on, because I don't want this is literally being recorded. I don't want to be recorded saying 2 feet and it was like 1 foot, you know. Um, yeah, I am that plant parent who takes a measuring tape to her plants sometimes. It was 18 inches,
That's almost 2 feet.
right? Yeah.
That's a foot and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, solid foot and a half. But I am
Nice.
blown away at the size of those again. Just didn't think that they would get bigger, and they are. And the Adansonia and the Mandula, oh, I can't wait. And the Baltic blue is definitely going on there.
Yes. Yep.
Yep. Okay. Well, I guess that's it for plant updates. We're both kind of geeking out. Big leaves.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode of Plant Prescription from Costa Farms. As always, if you have questions that you would love to hear us address, drop us an email at questions@costafarms.com or post them on any of our social media channels. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Pinterest.
I was trying to name. I was like, which one is he? Okay. We're on all of them.
And with that, happy gardening.
Bye bye.